Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to a brand new episode of The Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively address few articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination. The first article is related to nuclear waste and the associated concerns, which is from the Hindu, page number 10. The second article is related to the regulation of the big tech firms, as there have been instances of unfair trade practices by these firms, which is from the Hindu, page number 19. The third article is related to a recent report which has highlighted India as the top arms importer in the period 2019-23. This is from the Hindu, page number 6. The fourth article is related to the redevelopment plan of Sabarmati Ashram, which is of pivotal importance considering the Indian struggle movement. Finally, we have the article of the Khelo India mission and the importance of sports for the youth in the country, which is from the Hindu, page number 9. So the first article is related to nuclear waste and the growing concerns. See, recently India has achieved a remarkable feat as it has entered the stage second of its three-stage nuclear power program. However, this feat, this accomplishment is accompanied by a larger problem, a bigger challenge, and that is of nuclear waste management. Now, this is a part of GS3 Science and Technology section. So let's begin. See, what is nuclear power? Nuclear power is that power which is extracted through the nuclear reactions, right? Now, primarily we have got three ways through which we can extract nuclear power. The first is nuclear decay. Now, this has application in very niche areas. For example, we have got radioisotope thermoelectric generators, RTGs. Now, these are used in space probes. Why? To provide constant source of power to these space probes. We have the example of Voyager 2, which has an RTG in it. Then you have got nuclear fusion and fission. Talking about the fusion, what happens in fusion is that you have got smaller atomic nuclei. In this case, you have got the isotopes of hydrogen, that is deuterium and tritium, which combine and form a larger atomic nuclei along with large amount of energy and subatomic particles. See, at present, we don't use fusion process for electricity generation, and it is in experimental stages. We have got the ITER, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, right, which is in the phases of the experimental progress, experimental study. Also, it must be noted that fusion is the process which is primarily responsible for stars formation, right. Now, talking about the fission, what happens in fission is that you have got a neutron which is bombarded on a larger atomic nuclei, in this case the uranium-235, and it fragments, it breaks into smaller atomic nuclei, that is, here you have barium-144 and krypton-89, along with subatomic particles, that is 3 neutrons, and a large amount of energy. Presently, the nuclear power plants around the world use nuclear fission to generate thermal energy and utilize this thermal energy to produce the final electricity. Alright. Now, talking about the nuclear waste. See, nuclear wastes are highly radioactive. They are highly radioactive and they require special facilities to prevent leakages and contamination, right? Now, what is spent fuel? See, in nuclear reactions, you have the fuel which is used. Once it is used, it is removed, and that is highly radioactive, and that forms the major challenge with regards to the nuclear waste. Now, in order to handle the spent fuel, we have got different strategies. We'll talk about it. Now, what is the need for nuclear waste management? Now, if you go by the data, we have got numerous countries which have long-standing nuclear power programs. For example, the US. Now, it is estimated that by 2015, US had accumulated almost 70,000 tons of nuclear waste. Similarly, by 2014, Russia had accumulated around 22,000 tons of nuclear waste. Now, this is huge. Therefore, we need proper strategies to tackle the challenge of nuclear waste. Now, talking about the current nuclear waste handling practices, we have got the SFPs, which are nothing but spent fuel pools, which are pools of water around 40 to 50 feet deep. And what happens is we have storage racks in them. We keep the nuclear waste and until they reach to a certain temperature, until they cool down, right? Then after they cool down, we put them into dry casks. Now, what are these? These are nothing but steel cylinders with inert gases inside them, and they're reinforced with more steel and concrete so that you have radiation shielding, right? Then we have got the liquid waste treatments. Now what happens in this is that when the nuclear waste has short-lived radionuclides, we employ this technique. For example, Japan has done it to sanitize the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Then we have got the vitrification process. See, in literal sense, vitrification means to convert into glass. So for those waste, those liquid waste which have high quantity of nuclear waste in them, we use the process of vitrification. It is highly technologically intensive. Then you have got geological disposal. What happens is we have got the burial grounds deep inside the earth where we put the nuclear waste into different containers. The good part is that it is away from the human activity. The bad part is that if disturbed, it can lead to catastrophe. Then we have got the reprocessing. Now what is reprocessing? See, reprocessing is the techniques employed to separate the fissile and non-fissile materials, right? So with this technique, it is obviously very efficient, but obviously it involves a lot of cost, right? And it also has the concern for nuclear weapons proliferation, right? All right. Now what are the issues in nuclear waste handling? See, we have got the environmental contamination. Now what was recently observed in Assay, second salt mine in Germany, was that decades back we had the burial of thousands of barrels of radioactive waste, but with time it led to the water contamination in the surrounding areas. Then you have got the cost concerns. We know that setting up of nuclear power plant is already a very cost intensive process. Now if you add the waste management costs, the total cost becomes manifold. Then we have got technologically intensive. Now these processes, these waste management processes are highly technologically intensive and only few countries have knowledge about it, right? For example, we have the process of vitrification. For example, we have the process of reprocessing, right? Then we have got the environmental injustices. What we mean by is that there have been instances where the developed countries have exported hazardous nuclear waste to least developing countries. Therefore, those who are actually getting the benefit of the nuclear power are not incurring the cost, right? Now, how is India handling its nuclear waste? So, India has 3 reprocessing facilities, one at Trombay with a capacity of 50 tons of heavy metal per year. Then you have one facility in Tarapur and the other in Kalpakkam, both each with a capacity of 100 tons of heavy metal per year. Now, the facility in Trombay is also used as a source of the fuel for the second stage of the India's nuclear power program, and it also serves as a source for the weapon grade nuclear material, right? Also, according to the government, we have got the in situ treatment at the plants itself for the low and the intermediate nuclear waste. But it needs to be kept in mind that India has entered into stage 2nd. So it calls for a more focused approach for nuclear waste management. Now, coming to the second article, now it relates to the regulation of big tech firms. See, the Committee on Digital Competition Law has recently recommended, now this committee was formed last year by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Now it has recommended to come out with the legislation so that they can regulate the market power of the big tech firms like Google and Meta. Now we'll read about what big tech firms are and what are the concerns associated. Now it forms the part of GS2, which is Government Policies and Intervention, and it also forms a part of GS3, that is Industrial Policy and Growth. Now what are big tech firms? See, big tech firms are the largest IT companies. Now these companies have dominant market share, and it has raised concerns over these companies using monopolistic practices or unfair trade practices. Now this can lead to, and it has led to, stifling competition, and it has also affected user choices, the consumer choices, right? Now we generally use the term GAFA for these big tech firms. Now what does this mean? See, G stands for Google, A stands for Amazon, F stands for Facebook, and A stands for Apple. Now if we talk about their market share, see, Google has a dominant market share of around 90% when it comes to the search engines. If we talk about Amazon, Amazon has a dominant market share in the e-commerce, right? And it also, through its subsidiary, has, that is the Amazon Web Services, has a dominant share in the cloud computing services. Then you have got the Facebook. Now we all know that Facebook owns Instagram, WhatsApp, right? The parent company Meta, right? It owns Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram, right? Then you have got Apple. Now Apple has a dominant share when it comes to high-end mobile devices, right? And also its operating system, that is iOS, right? Now, what are these monopolistic practices that these companies have been adopting? Now, first is anti-competitive acquisitions. There have been accusations that these companies have done acquisitions of smaller, potentially competitive players. For example, Meta did the acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp, right? Then you have got self-preferencing. What do we mean by it? There have been accusations, it has been alleged that these platforms are using their platforms to give preference to their own apps and services. For example, you have got the Play Store, which has been alleged to give preference to its own softwares, right? Then they have got the data advantage. See, understand that these companies have huge amount of data with them, right? And they are using this data to actually manipulate consumer choices, right? And also to have personalized advertisement, right? Then you have got the predatory pricing. See, these are the companies which have a lot of funds with them, financial clout. So what they're doing is they're actually selling their products and services at a very cheap price, right? And it is actually leading to uneven competition, and therefore smaller players are out of the race, right? Now, what is the impact of such practices? It leads to reduced innovation. Obviously, when you won't have players in the market, many players in the market, and you would actually, through the anti-competitive practices, do the acquisitions of the smaller player, you will have reduced innovations. Then it harms the consumers as they have got less choices. Moreover, the products and prices are very expensive, right? Then you have got the privacy concerns. As these companies have a lot of data with them, it has led to privacy concerns, right? Now, talking about the regulation of these big tech firms, we have got global initiatives as well as initiatives within India. For example, we have got the antitrust legislations. Now, these are the laws which prevent unfair trade practices, monopolistic practices, right? For example, you have the US Federal Trade Commission, which has rules to prevent such practices. Coming to data privacy regulations, the prime example is the the European Union's General Data Protection Regulations, which give more right to the user over their data, right? Coming to talking about India, we have got the Competition Act 2002, which was actually, it replaced the Monopolies and Trade Restrictive Practices Act 1969, right? And it led to the establishment of the Competition Commission of India, which is obviously a statutory body, and it prevents anti-competitive practices, right? Now, what have been the panel's observation with respect to these big tech firms? The first is the network effects. What it means is that on the basis of their market power, market dominance, it has led to a situation where the new entrants are not allowed to enter into the market, and thus it has restricted user choice, right? The end consumers. Then it talks about the concept of systemically significant digital enterprises. Now, what it means is that the panel has recommended that these firms need to self-designate if they have significant market presence, right, as systemically significant digital enterprises. And if they do not do so, they would be penalized, not on the basis of just their domestic revenues, but also on the basis of their global turnover, right? Then it has also recommended the formation of Digital Competition Act. Now, this is actually to regulate the market power of the big tech firms. It would actually equip the Competition Commission of India so that it can match the pace of digitization, and then it can have the requisite regulatory control over these firms, right? So it remains to be seen whether the government accepts these recommendations or not, and hopefully the government would try to endeavor that these companies do not exploit the market conditions. Now, coming to the next article, recently there was a report by the Swedish think tank Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which said that India has been the top arms importer in 2019-23 period. Now, this is related to GS3 security. It is also related to GS4 peace and conflict resolution, and it is also related to the SA. Now, talking about the arms industry. See, arms industry, also known as the defense industry. Now, this is a global industry, right, which actually focuses upon the manufacture and sale of weapons and military technology around the world, right. So, we have got both the public as well as private participants. For example, we have got the company like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, right. Now, if we go by the data by Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the top 100 largest arm producing companies, they had a combined sales of around $600 billion in 2022. Now, that is a huge number. Now, what are the impacts of growing arms trade? First is the security concerns. See, as you will have arms trade, greater arms trade, it will lead to more regional conflicts, right? Then you have got humanitarian costs. Human lives, innocent human lives are lost, and it leads to human rights violations, right? It also leads to casualties, right? Then you have got international relations. Most of the arms suppliers around the world are developed countries, and they use this, they see this through a political angle for their own selfish purposes, right? Now, what have been the SIPRI's, the Stockholm International Peace Research observations? First, it has said that India has been the top arms importer for the period 2019-23, and it is 4.7%. The imports have been higher than the period 2014 and 18, right? Then Russia has remained as a main arms supplier to India. However, this is the first 5-year period since 1960 that Russia's share in the total arms supply to India has been less than 50%, right? Then arms import by the European countries have increased by 94%, and this is primarily due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Then you have got the top 3 arms importer around the world. The first is India, then you have got Saudi Arabia, and then you have got the Qatar. Now, our neighbor Pakistan, it is the 5th largest arms importer, and it has grown up. The imports have grown up by 43%, right? And China supplying as much as 82% of its total arms needs. Exports by the US have grown up by 17%, while that of Russia's exports have halved in the same period. Then France has emerged as the 2nd largest arms supplier around the world, and its sales have grown up by 47%. And India is its largest recipient. Almost 30% of the French supplies have come to India. Now, coming to the next article, we have got the Sabarmati Ashram Redevelopment Plan. Now, Sabarmati Ashram is of pivotal importance as regards to the India's struggle for independence, right? So, on the 94th anniversary of the Dandi March, the Prime Minister actually unveiled a master plan of around 1200 crores for the redevelopment of the Gandhi Ashram. Now, this relates to the GS1 Indian Heritage and Culture and India's freedom struggle. So, let's start. Coming to the historical importance. See, Gandhi over his lifetime actually set up 5 settlements, right? 2 were in South Africa. The first is in the Phoenix settlement in the Natal, and the second, the Tolstoy farm in outside Johannesburg. So, Gandhi lived in South Africa from 1893 to 1914, right? And in India, he came in January 1915, where he set up 3 more settlements, right? According to a prominent author, Neelkant Chhaya, in his book Gandhi's Places, he says that these settlements were the places of continuous experiment and search, right? So, Gandhi actually set up the first ashram in Ahmedabad in Kocharab in 1915. But this was not in accordance to what Gandhi actually idealized, right? It was not built according to Gandhi's aspiration, right? So finally, in 1970, Gandhi founded the ashram at Sabarmati, his 4th ashram on the western bank of Sabarmati river. Now, talking about the importance of Sabarmati Ashram, now it is seen to be the most important in Gandhi's life. Why? Because this is the ashram which Gandhi himself designed, and it was built using the local materials, right? Then it is also the cradle, the starting point of 8 major movements related to the India's struggle for independence. The first is the Dandi March, which was against the British monopoly over the salt, its manufacture and its sale, right? Then you have got the Champaran Satyagraha. The peasants in Champaran, they were actually exploited by the British planters and they were forced to grow indigo. So they called Gandhi and he started the Champaran Satyagraha. Then we have got the Ahmedabad mill strike. So the mill workers actually revolted against the mill owners as they refused to pay the extra bonuses, right? Then the Kheda Satyagraha, it was actually done by the peasants as they were exploited by the taxes of British, right? Then you had the Khadi movement, which actually focused upon the self-sufficiency and independence from the British textiles. Now, the Rowlatt Act and the Khilafat movement. Now, Rowlatt Act was an act by the British government where it gave the arbitrary power to police to arrest anyone, right? Now, Khilafat movement. Khilafat movement was initiated to restore and preserve the authority of the Ottoman Caliph. Ottoman Caliph, right? So, then you also had the non-cooperation movement, which actually stood for self-governance and ultimately getting the full independence, right? Now, the redevelopment plan is actually based upon the 1949 satellite image of the ashram. It is also based upon the trust's document, the brochures and the visitors book, right? So you have got some of the eminent visitors from Queen Elizabeth, then you have got Bill Clinton, then you had Nelson Mandela, so you also had the Dalai Lama. So on the basis of all these sources, you have the redevelopment plan. Now, the redeveloped buildings and prisons would actually reflect the Gandhi's life. That is his daily routine, right? The way he interacted with children and youth, right? And it would also focus upon the fact that the visitors actually learn the principles of sustainability and self-sufficiency, right? Now, the next article is related to the Khelo India mission and the importance of sports for the development of youth. So recently, we had the Khelo India Games in 4 cities of Tamil Nadu, that is Chennai, Madurai, Trichy and Coimbatore. We also need to keep in mind that PM has been focusing upon promoting sports among the youths. Now, it relates to GS2, the development sector, GS3, the demographic dividend, GS4, sports as a unifying factor, and also the SA. Now, talking about the importance for sports, see, especially in Indian context, where you have around 65% of the population under the age of 35, sports become really important. First is, it leads to increased physical activity, which actually leads to more healthy lifestyle and fitness. Then there is reduced risk of chronic diseases. For example, you have obesity, you have diabetes, you have chronic heart diseases. It leads to reduction in the risks. Then you have got enhanced self-confidence and self-esteem. See, once you participate in the games, once you actually overcome the challenge, we have got improved self-confidence and self-esteem. There have been studies which point out to the fact that sports actually leads to stress reduction and improved mental health. Then you have got improved social interaction. See, once you play in teams, once you collaborate, you develop the skill of the teamwork, right? So obviously it leads to better communication among the teams. Then it leads to leadership development through the captaincy of the team. Then finally, it also leads to improved cognitive functions as it gives more power to focus, to concentrate, right? Now, talking about the Khelo India mission. Now, this mission was launched in 2017-18 by Prime Minister to revitalize India's sporting culture and to achieve sporting excellence in various international events. Now, the objectives of this mission are: first, the grassroots development. Now, it actually focuses upon identification and nurturing the talent, the sporting talent of individuals. It also focuses upon improved infrastructure, that is to create and upgrade its sports infrastructure. It also is focusing upon enhanced training so that to equip athletes with better training facilities. Then increase participation across all ages and genders. And then you have got sporting excellence, that is to achieve good positions in the international sporting events, right? So what are the features? The first is state level Khelo India centers. Now, these are the centers which are set up in collaboration with the state governments, which actually provide basic facilities to the athletes. Then you have got Khelo India Youth Games, where you see the participation of athletes under the age of 17 years all over the country. Then you have got Khelo India University Games, where the participants from different universities in India gather and participate in the sports. Then you have got focus upon talent search and development. Then it focuses upon the promotion of sports for women and PWDs, that is persons with disabilities. And it also focuses upon development of indigenous sports, right? Now, let's talk about the achievements of Khelo India mission. First is the enhanced participation of northeastern states. There has been an enhanced participation of athletes from the northeastern states, especially in, let's say, football, in boxing, right? Then adequate attention is being paid to indigenous sports and not just the Olympic disciplines. For example, you have got the Yogasana, you have got Gatka, you have got Malakhamb, you have got Silambam, and you have got Kalaripayattu. Now, these all are martial art forms, indigenous martial art forms. Then you have got the ice hockey in Ladakh, ice skating, which actually also saw the participation of Indian Army and Indo-Tibetan Border Police. And then you have around 300 sports infrastructure projects which have been approved worth rupees 3,000 crores. Now, it has also contributed significantly to India's glorious moments in international events. For example, the Olympics, the World Championship, the Asian Games, the Commonwealth Games. It is to be noted that almost 63% of the Khelo India athletes have brought medals back to their homes. Moreover, an equal impetus is being given to the women participation, which actually led to a ratio of 50:50 for men versus women athletes in the recently organized Khelo India Games. Thus, we see that sports is very important for the overall development of the youth. That's all for today. Thank you.